Clara wiped the last of the condensation from the diner's front window, staring out at the dimming street. It had been a quiet afternoon, and as the evening crept in, the little diner nestled on the corner of Maple Street was almost empty. She glanced at the empty tables, the faded booths where laughter and chatter used to fill the air, but now only silence remained. 5 years ago, when Clara opened the cozy corner, it was a dream come true. The diner was her escape, a way to rebuild after losing her husband in a tragic accident. It had started small, but felt like a lifeline, offering comfort in the form of hearty meals to those who sought refuge from their own struggles. But now, 5 years later, things were different. The new restaurants with their flashy signs and hipster menus on the other side of town had slowly lured away her regular customers. Business was down, bills were piling up, and Clara felt the weight of it all pressing against her chest every time she opened the mailbox. She glanced at the pile of unpaid invoices on the counter. There was the electric bill, the supply orders, the loan repayment. Every one of them a reminder that the cozy corner was running on fumes. Her 2 children, Jake and Emma, were growing fast. Jake, 10 years old, was already talking about what he wanted to be when he grew up, dreaming of gadgets and science experiments, while Emma, 7, was all about dolls and dance classes. But Clara couldn't even afford the school supplies they both needed for the upcoming term. How could she tell them there was nothing extra this year? It was hard enough to keep the diner running, let alone give them the things they deserved. "Mom, you okay?" Jake's voice broke through her thoughts. He was standing at the counter, holding up a half-eaten sandwich. Clara forced a smile. "Just thinking, kiddo." Jake nodded and went back to his meal, but Clara could see the worry in his eyes. He knew things weren't going well. The children, despite their innocent optimism, could sense the tension in the air. As Clara turned back to the counter, a tight knot formed in her stomach. She couldn't give up. She had to make this work for their sake. But deep down, she knew she was running out of time. With the diner nearly empty and closing time approaching, Clara sighed and began the process of shutting down for the night. Maybe tomorrow would be better. But as she looked around one last time, a feeling of dread swept over her. She wasn't sure she could keep this up much longer. The sound of rain hitting the roof of the diner intensified as Clara flicked the switch on the neon sign outside. The glowing "open" light flickered for a moment before going dark. She grabbed her jacket, about to lock the door when a figure appeared in the doorway, a frail man drenched from the storm. Clara hesitated. It was rare for anyone to come in this late, especially on a night like this. The storm had driven people inside, but they'd already eaten. The man stood there for a moment, shaking from the cold, his clothes threadbare, and his face drawn with exhaustion. "Can I help you?" Clara asked softly, not wanting to turn him away. The man looked at her with tired eyes, his voice weak. "Just looking for a place to sit out of the rain." Clara studied him. His clothes were soaked, and he looked like he hadn't had a decent meal in weeks. There was no sign of any money on him. But despite her own financial struggles, Clara couldn't bring herself to turn him away. The man's eyes spoke of hunger, not just of the stomach, but of the soul. "I can make you something warm," Clara offered. "You look like you could use it." The man's face softened in gratitude, though he hesitated. "I don't have much to offer. I don't need anything," Clara said firmly. "I've been there. I understand what it's like. Stay. Have some soup." She guided him to one of the booths, handing him a napkin to wipe his face. As she moved to the kitchen, Clara thought back to her early days in this country. She'd come here with nothing, a young woman trying to make a life after losing everything. She knew what it felt like to be hungry, to have no one to turn to. Offering this man a warm meal felt like the least she could do, even if it meant her dwindling savings would be a little less that night. Clara set to work in the kitchen with a sense of purpose. She reached for the ingredients she knew by heart, her grandmother's recipe for chicken soup. The dish had been passed down for generations, a comfort food that had always reminded Clara of simpler times, when life hadn't been so complicated. As the chicken simmered, Clara diced the vegetables, carefully chopping the carrots, onions, and celery. The familiar sense of garlic and herbs filled the air, making her heart feel lighter for a moment. She thought back to when she first started cooking, standing by her grandmother's side in the tiny kitchen of their old farmhouse. Her grandmother had always said that food was more than just sustenance. It was love in its purest form, a way to connect with others. Clara hadn't fully understood that back then, but now, with every dish she prepared, she felt her grandmother's presence in the kitchen with her. When the soup was ready, Clara ladled it into a bowl, the steam rising as she carried it to the man sitting at the booth. She could see the wariness in his eyes, but there was also a glimmer of hope, a quiet relief in knowing that someone cared enough to share a meal with him. She placed the bowl in front of him, along with a warm roll she had just pulled out of the oven. "Here you go," Clara said, her voice soft but steady. "I hope it warms you up." The man's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the spoon. His eyes closed for a moment, savoring the aroma of the soup, as if it was the first real food he'd tasted in a long time. This smells like home," he murmured. Clara smiled, sitting across from him for a moment. "My grandmother's recipe," she said, her voice filled with nostalgia. "She taught me to cook when I was a little girl. It's meant to bring comfort." The man nodded, taking the first bite. Clara watched as his face softened, the harshness of the world momentarily fading away. As he ate, she felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that this simple act, this meal, was more than just food. It was a gesture of kindness, one that in her heart she hoped would make a difference in both their lives. As the warmth of the soup spread through Robert's tired body, he began to relax. His hands, which had trembled when he first sat down, now moved with more purpose as he ate, savoring each spoonful. Clara noticed the way he looked at the bowl with a sort of quiet reverence, as though the simple comfort of a meal had given him more than just nourishment. It had given him a sense of dignity. "Thank you," Robert said softly, setting down his spoon for a moment. He looked up at Clara, his gaze filled with gratitude. "I can't remember the last time someone did something like this for me." Clara smiled, a little embarrassed. "It's nothing. I've been there, you know. When I first came to this country, things weren't easy for me either." Robert's eyes brightened slightly at her words. "You're from here?" he asked, a flicker of curiosity in his voice. Clara shook her head. "No, I came from overseas. I was young, didn't have much when I arrived. My husband and I were trying to make a life together, but—" She paused, the memory of her husband's passing still too fresh, even after all these years. "Things didn't turn out the way we planned. I ended up raising my kids alone." Robert nodded slowly, as though he understood all too well. He took a deep breath before continuing. "I used to work as an accountant for a big company. Everything was going well until the downsizing happened. Suddenly, I was out of a job. And then, my wife got sick. She passed away shortly after." His voice cracked slightly, but he pressed on. "The medical bills drained everything. My savings, my house, everything. I haven't had a proper meal in months." Clara felt a pang of sympathy for him, recognizing the pain in his words. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her heart aching for him. "Life can be so unfair sometimes." The two of them sat in silence for a moment, both lost in their own memories, but somehow connected by the shared weight of hardship. Clara's thoughts turned to her own children, Jake and Emma, and how she had to be strong for them, even when the world seemed to be falling apart. "I know what it's like to lose everything," Clara said softly. "But we keep going, don't we? For the people we love, for ourselves." Robert nodded again, his eyes thoughtful. "I suppose we do, and sometimes we find hope in the strangest places." Clara smiled at him, a sense of understanding between them, something unspoken but powerful. She had shared her story with him, and in return, he had done the same. It was a rare connection, one that comforted her in a way she hadn't expected. As Robert finished his meal, Clara cleared the table, offering him the rest of the bread she had baked. She could see how much it meant to him, the simple act of someone caring. The storm outside had started to ease, but the silence between them lingered. Robert looked around the diner, taking in the humble decor, the small space that had once felt so full of promise. His gaze lingered on the photos on the walls, the old family pictures Clara had hung to remind her of the love and memories that kept her going. He looked back at Clara and smiled, his expression kind, yet filled with a sense of finality. "You're a good person, Clara. A rare one," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made her pause. Clara felt a blush creep to her cheeks. I'm just trying to get by, like everyone else. Robert shook his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. No, you're more than that. You've got something special here, and you don't even know it yet. Before Clara could ask him what he meant, Robert reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He set it gently on the table in front of her. This is for you, he said simply. Clara frowned, glancing at the note. She opened it hesitantly, her fingers trembling slightly. Inside, she found a business card and a letter written in neat handwriting. The card had the logo of a well-known company in the restaurant industry, and the letter was brief but powerful. Clara, I have been watching your diner for some time now. Your food is exceptional, and there is a warmth here that is rare in today's world. You have something special, and I believe your diner has great potential to grow. I would like to discuss opportunities to help you expand your business. Please call me tomorrow at the number on the card, and we can set up a meeting. Best, Robert Hunter. Clara stared at the letter, her heart pounding in her chest. This couldn't be real. Robert was just a kind, hungry man who had come in off the street, wasn't he? But here he was, offering her something, an opportunity, a chance to change everything. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. You're serious? Robert gave a small, knowing smile. I've been in the business for a long time, Clara. I see potential when it's right in front of me. He stood up, his hands shaking just a little as he adjusted his coat. I'll be back tomorrow. Don't lose hope. With that, he turned and left the diner, leaving Clara alone at the table with her racing thoughts. She couldn't believe it. A chance to expand her diner? To really make something of this? But why had he chosen her? 100 questions ran through her mind, but none of them had answers. At least not yet. As Clara sat there, staring at the business card in her hand, a spark of hope ignited in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, this was the break she'd been waiting for. The next morning, Clara barely slept. She kept turning the letter over in her mind, rereading Robert's words. She had spent so many years just trying to keep the diner afloat, scraping by with every penny, that the thought of expansion, of having investors interested in her little diner, seemed too good to be true. By the time the sun began to rise, Clara had made up her mind. She wasn't going to let this opportunity slip through her fingers. She picked up the phone, her hands shaking slightly, and dialed the number on Robert's card. The line rang 3 times before someone picked up. This is Clara, she said, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside her. I'm calling about the letter you left me last night. There was a brief pause before the voice on the other end responded, calm and confident. I'm glad you called, Clara. I'm Robert's associate, and he's asked me to set up a meeting with you today. Are you available at 11? Clara's heart skipped a beat. Yes, she said without hesitation. I'll be there. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Clara couldn't concentrate on anything else, her mind focused on the meeting ahead. She cleaned the diner as best as she could, tried to settle her nerves, but it felt impossible. The idea that this stranger, this kind man who had come in from the rain, might be the key to everything she had dreamed of seemed almost surreal. At exactly 11 a.m., Clara locked the door of the cozy corner and stepped outside, her heart racing. It was time to take the first step into a new chapter of her life. Clara had never felt such a mix of excitement and dread in her life. The morning had flown by in a blur of nervous preparation. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the collar of her jacket and checked her reflection in the diner's small mirror. She had to look confident. She had to look like the woman who deserved this opportunity, even if inside she was questioning everything. Could her little diner really turn into something bigger? Could she take on this challenge? As the clock ticked closer to the hour, Clara felt the weight of the moment. She glanced at the empty tables one last time, the familiar sights of her diner, her sanctuary, now filled with the potential for something far greater than she ever imagined. The bell above the door jingled, and Clara looked up to see Robert walk in, this time dressed in a sharp suit. He was no longer the frail, wet man from the night before. There was a confidence in his posture now, his movements deliberate and assured. Behind him, a group of well-dressed men and women entered the diner, their presence immediately changing the atmosphere. Clara froze. The investors were here. Robert gave her a reassuring smile as he approached the counter. Clara, these are the people I mentioned. They're interested in what you've built here. Clara's heart raced. She was used to serving food to regular customers, familiar faces who sat down for a quick bite. But these people were different. They didn't just come for a meal. They came to see her diner as a business, an opportunity. One of the investors, a middle-aged man with a sharp suit and glasses, stepped forward and extended his hand. "I'm Jack," he said, his tone professional but warm. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Clara. Robert has told us a lot about your diner. We're excited to see it for ourselves." Clara shook his hand, her mind swirling. "It's nice to meet you all. Please, make yourselves at home. Let me know if there's anything you'd like to try." As the group settled into the booths, Clara could feel the tension in her chest. She had to make a good impression. She led them through the diner, explaining her menu, the history of the recipes, the way she had built the place from the ground up. The investors ordered a variety of dishes, including the famous chicken soup that had captured Robert's attention. Clara watched as they sampled each dish, discussing flavors, textures, and presentation. Every word felt like a test, every bite a judgment. But as the minutes passed, Clara saw the looks of approval in their eyes. Robert, sitting at the head of the table, seemed pleased with their reactions. Finally, after several tastings, Jack stood up and smiled at Clara. "This is impressive, Clara. You've created something special here. We believe there's a real opportunity for expansion if you're interested." Clara's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment she had dreamed of. "Expansion?" she echoed, trying to keep her voice steady. "You mean, like opening more locations?" "Exactly," Jack said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "We believe your diner has the potential to become a chain, reaching even more people with the kind of food and warmth you offer here. We'd love to discuss how we can help make that happen." Clara looked around the room at the familiar faces of her customers, the regulars who had supported her since day one. Could she really expand and maintain what made her diner special? The personal touch, the heart, the sense of family? Her mind raced as she processed their words. This wasn't just a dream anymore. It was an opportunity that could change everything. The days following the meeting passed in a whirlwind. Clara had signed the initial agreement with the investors, and suddenly, the Cozy Corner wasn't just a small diner anymore. It was part of a bigger vision. The investors promised to provide the capital needed for expansion, while Robert would remain as a trusted advisor, guiding Clara through the process. The first step came sooner than Clara expected. The vacant storefront next door, an old hardware store, was available, and the investors wasted no time in securing it. Clara couldn't believe it as she stood in front of the new space, her eyes scanning the storefront that would soon house the first of what could be many locations of the Cozy Corner. The renovations began quickly, with workers tearing down the old, dilapidated walls and replacing them with fresh paint and modern fixtures, all while maintaining the diner's warm, welcoming atmosphere. Clara was involved in every decision, choosing the decor, selecting the right equipment, and even working with the architects to make sure the new space would feel like an extension of the diner she had poured her heart into. While the construction went on, Clara also had to hire additional staff to handle the increased business. She brought on a few of her regulars who had been loyal since the early days of the diner, offering them the opportunity to be part of the growing family. Clara felt a deep sense of pride as she watched familiar faces from the community step into new roles, helping the diner expand while staying true to its roots. Soon, the day arrived when the new location was ready to open. Clara stood outside the doors of the freshly renovated Cozy Corner with Robert and the investors, feeling a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "This is it, Clara," Robert said, his voice filled with admiration. "You've built something incredible, and now it's time for the world to see it." Clara smiled, a tear threatening to form in her eye as she took in the sight of the new diner. It was more than just a business, it was a dream come true. With the ribbon-cutting ceremony behind them, the new location opened its doors, and the line of customers began to spill out into the street. Clara felt a surge of joy as she welcomed each one, proud to see that her vision was becoming a reality. The diner was no longer just a small neighborhood spot. It was a place that could touch the lives of so many more. Over the following months, Clara's diner continued to grow at an incredible pace. The second location was a success, and soon after, plans were in motion to open even more. Clara found herself juggling the responsibilities of managing multiple locations, overseeing staff, and ensuring that the heart of the cozy corner was preserved. She moved her family into a better apartment, no longer struggling to pay bills or worry about the next meal. For the first time in years, Clara felt a sense of stability and peace. Jake and Emma had new school supplies, new clothes, and even their own rooms. Clara couldn't help but smile as she watched them grow, knowing that her hard work had paid off, not just for her, but for them as well. But despite the expansion, Clara never lost sight of what had made her diner special. She made sure that each new location stayed true to the original, with the same welcoming atmosphere and the same delicious home-cooked meals. The recipes her grandmother had passed down were at the heart of everything, and Clara made sure to visit each location regularly, ensuring that the quality of food and service never wavered. As the business grew, Clara began to hire more people, particularly those who had struggled in the same ways she once had. Single parents, students, people who needed a second chance. The Cozy Corner wasn't just a place to eat, it was a place that gave back to the community that had supported her all these years. The success of the diner became more than just financial. It became a story of hope, of people helping one another. And Clara felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her dream had not only changed her life, but had also touched the lives of so many others. A year after the expansion, the Cozy Corner was no longer just a local diner. It had become a successful chain with 5 thriving locations. Clara stood in her office, looking at a framed picture on the wall. It was the note Robert had left her that night, the letter that had started everything. She could hardly believe how far she had come. The diner's success wasn't just about the food. It was about the people, the community that had embraced her and helped her build something meaningful. She made it a point to continue teaching her staff the importance of treating every customer like family, just as she had done when it was only a small diner. Robert still visited regularly, offering advice and guidance whenever Clara needed it. He had become more than just an investor. He was a mentor and a friend, someone who had seen her potential before she could even see it in herself. Clara reflected on the journey she had taken, from the days when she was struggling to make ends meet to now, where she was running a growing business. It wasn't just her success. It was a success that had been built on kindness, hard work, and the belief that one small act of generosity could change everything. With her family by her side, Clara knew that no matter what came next, she had built something lasting. The Cozy Corner wasn't just a diner. It was a place that had brought people together, offered hope, and provided the warmth of home to anyone who needed it. And in that moment, Clara knew that no matter how much her business grew, it would always remain a place where love was served with every meal. Clara stood before the window in her office, gazing out at the city that had grown around her. Tall buildings had risen, and people hurried through the streets, each lost in their own world. But amidst all the changes, one thing remained constant. The Cozy Corner was still the same place it had always been, where every meal was prepared with love and passion. It was the place where she had found her belief in herself, and from that belief, she had turned her dream into reality. Looking back on the long journey, Clara couldn't help but smile as she remembered the first time she met Robert, when he walked into her diner on that rainy night, simply asking for a meal. A small act of kindness, yet it had changed her entire life. Today, the Cozy Corner wasn't just a diner. It had become a symbol of perseverance, kindness, and the strength of community. Clara was no longer just a successful restaurant owner. She had created a second home for anyone who needed warmth and comfort. With every meal served, every smile from a customer, Clara knew she was continuing the legacy her grandmother had passed down. Kindness is a flame that never goes out, and when you give, you receive double in return. Though the Cozy Corner had grown, Clara never forgot those early struggles, the long nights and sleepless days, fighting to keep her dream alive. And now, she wasn't just changing her own life. She was changing the lives of many others. Clara's story, from a single mother to a successful businesswoman, stood as a testament to the power of perseverance, compassion, and belief in the future. One small act can change the world, and Clara proved that. One meal, one gesture, one simple help, yet incredibly valuable. Life will always change, but enduring values like love, sincerity, and kindness will forever remain. Clara had built something more than a business. She had built a legacy of care, where the flame of kindness would forever guide those who needed it. Thank you for watching. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch and listen to Clara's journey. We hope you found her story inspiring, filled with hope and the power of kindness. It's amazing how one small act can change not just a life, but an entire community. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to give it a like and share it with others who might need a little inspiration today. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more uplifting stories like this one. Your support means the world to us, and we can't wait to bring you more heartwarming tales. Until next time, keep spreading kindness and believing in the power of change.